This is the Pennyworth podcast on TV Podcast Industries. We're talking about Pennyworth Season 2, Episode 2, The Burning Bridge.
We got the money.
What money?
We got enough money now for the bribes and the transit papers and the visas. We're going to America, Mum. A new life.
Just now, on the telly, a man in America died from a bear having a go at him. They get up to all sorts, the animals over there.
Not everywhere. Not in the cities.
I keep telling you I'm not going, and you keep acting as though you can't hear me. New life, he says. What am I going to do with a new life?
Well, I'm not going to leave you here, am I? What if the neighbours came round and saw you like this?
Like what?
There's cobwebs on the mantel and you're on the sherry and chips watching Bonanza. If Dad was here, he'd say, "Where's your gumption, Mother?" He'd say, "Pull your socks up."
And I'd tell him where to shove his bloody socks. And bugger the neighbours.
Welcome back, Governors, to the Pennyworth podcast on TV Podcast Industries. We're talking about Pennyworth, Season 2, Episode 2, The Burning Bridge. I'm one of your hosts, Derek.
Hello there, fellow Governors. Season's greetings. I am one of your other hosts, John.
Yes. Happy holidays. Just a couple of days away from Christmas.
I know.
Yeah. Kind of cool, isn't it? Like it's a brand new year for us because we're going to be out of lockdown for Christmas.
Woohoo!
Seeing other humans, having dinner with them.
Yes, and things are deep and crisp and even.
Well, yes, they are.
Yes, it's quite nippy at the moment, for sure, with the frost.
Yeah, a bit cold.
Yeah.
Cold outside.
I suppose, as Alfie, Dave Boy, and Baz would say, stay frosty.
They might. Yes.
Certainly back in their army days.
Yeah, boots on. Yeah, we're going to talk about the second episode of Pennyworth. A bit of a setup episode this time. What did you think overall, John, of this episode?
No, I mean, I thought this was good. It was fine, but it was very much setting things up.
Mm-hmm.
It really was putting the pieces in place.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it dropped, compared to the first episode for me. But still, you know, there were some really nice touches in here that kind of made me smile, and I really liked. But certainly this felt more of an episode that needed to just kind of set the scene for what comes next, whether it be with Thomas and the CIA, with Crowley, whether it was, with the money issues that Alfie has, and also what ultimately may happen with Project Stormcloud with the Raven Union.
Yeah.
So it just felt like one of those episodes.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, just not as good as the first episode for me.
Yeah.
But I mean, we'll get into that, I suppose.
Yeah.
As I say, I still think there were a lot of really nice touches throughout this episode.
Definitely, and it's the second episode of the 8-episode season, but yeah, lots of setup in here, lots of really interesting ways that they've dealt with the characters to set them up for the rest of the series. So let's talk all about it. We will talk, obviously, in full spoiler-filled detail about Pennyworth Season 2, Episode 2. Make sure you watch the episode before you continue on listening, obviously.
Although I do think I've probably spoilt most of
little
it by
bit.
just saying what I just said. So apologies, fellow governors.
But we do want to hear your thoughts of the episodes as you go through them. Make sure you email us with your thoughts to feedback@tvpodcastindustries.com. And if you haven't subscribed to our podcast, please subscribe over at tvpodcastindustries.com, or you can find the Pennyworth podcast through Spotify, Apple Podcasts,
Google Podcasts, or any other straight-laced or groovy podcast catcher.
Yeah.
Groovy.
Exactly. Let's get into the episode itself, John. The episode, once again, written by Bruno Heller, one of the showrunners for the show, and directed by Danny Cannon once again. I know that switches over as the season goes on, but nice to see the two creators of this show and two of the creators of Gotham back together for another episode of the show.
Definitely. And of course, it will hopefully all lead to the final episode being written by Bruno Heller and directed by Danny Cannon. Or maybe vice versa. Who knows?
Yes.
Just to sort of link in with your current theory and I think rule of good TV shows that the showrunner normally always writes at least the first and the last episode.
Yes, very much so. And I think Brynner Heller wrote almost every episode of season 1 as well. So likely that he's at least got a co-writing credit for the final episode of the season. But that's still my working theory. I have heard some rumors that occasionally showrunners do take some more credit for writing of episodes than they perhaps deserve sometimes. So it may not be a full rule. But I have noticed when the showrunner's credit isn't on the last episode, it usually means they've run off and joined another project. So the show kind of goes off the rails in those final episodes. But John, do you want to tell us what they gave us with your synopsis for the episode?
Sure. Alfie and the boys have money and are ready to head for a new life in the USA. But Alfie is having trouble telling Sandy at the Delaney Club of his decision to leave England, and he still can't convince his mum to move with him, as she still struggles with the death of her husband and Alfie's involvement in that fateful night. As the Raven Union make plans to press their advantage over the English League, differences between Lord Harwood and Francis Gaunt bubble to the surface over the terrifying Project Stormcloud. To make things worse for the English League, the CIA has decided to undermine their leadership as they go after British PM Archbishop Potter over his moral stance against the newly developed hydrogen bomb. While Thomas is uncomfortable with this course of action, he makes plans to employ his old satanic adversary, Anthony Crowley, to discredit Potter. Elsewhere, Bette Sykes is still on the run from the Raven Union with her hostage Katie Browning, and Alfie finds himself embroiled in another hostage situation. With his mum kidnapped, Alfie, Dave Boy and Bazza attempt to rescue her, but things head south quickly as Inspector Aziz and the police interrupt the hostage negotiations. In the confusion, the ransom of £20,000 is taken by the kidnappers, and while his mum is safe, the loss of the money puts Alfie's American plans very much on hold.
Well, you knew this was going to happen at the start of the season, wasn't it? You have to kind of take away that bridge, I suppose, to America. That idea that Alfie could be running off any episode to brand new locations into season 2.
Yes,
so,
there will be no American shots in this season.
Yeah, I think we might get another
right at the end, maybe.
Yeah, perhaps, or we may get another one of those scenes in a bunker while Thomas Wayne debriefs the CIA again, perhaps. That's in America, isn't it? Yeah, that's definitely in America. No outdoor shots in America. Or maybe they will arrive and someone gets attacked by a bear at the end of the season.
Exactly. Or my favourite, Killer Croc.
Well, absolutely.
Maybe he's already there. He is sort of in the sewers.
Yeah, well, that would be the DC tie-in. I was just more talking about the fear of Alfie's mom that she'll get attacked by a bear if she goes to America, which was true. A very, very funny quote. Let's talk about the episodes the way we've been talking about them over this season. We're going to be splitting up our episodes into what's been happening with Alfie and the boys, what's going on the Raven Union, and what's going on in the English League. And if we have any other notes or any other thoughts about the episode, we'll wrap them up in notes at the end. Lots of stuff going on with Alfie and the boys. We have, once again, almost exactly the same scene, I thought, for Alfie and the boys together, kind of setting out their plans to go to America. It was almost exactly the same scene as we saw last week. They all drank together, had a cheers, and said, we're off to the States. And you're going, okay, you've repeated that for 2 episodes now. Yeah. This ain't going to go bad. It's not going to go well, sorry.
Exactly. I do think the interesting thing is Alfie always seems to have a huge pile of money on his desk. Mm-hmm. And I know he's got a safe. And I'm just like going, put the money in the safe. Because I thought it was probably just going to get pinched and stolen by someone, rather than what actually plays out in this episode with their hostage situation.
Yeah, I have to say, the pile of money that was on the table in this one, as he's pouring out the champagne for his boys, and all the champagne just pours over the money. Does that increase money's value to have champagne on it, or decrease money value when you pour champagne all over it?
Well, it also depends how much champagne you buy with that money.
Well, yes, if you buy it, but not pour it over it. Then.
Exactly. But the other interesting thing we found out is that Alfie does own Delaney's club.
That's right.
In this episode. We weren't entirely sure in our episode 1 coverage, but he does actually own it. So I'm just there thinking, he really is not letting go of his army background. That PTSD that we kind of saw in season 1 with the flashbacks. Mm-hmm. He likes the edge. He likes that thin line and that adrenaline rush of going on these missions, because I'm just thinking a very successful club, like it appears to be, must be raking in the old money for Alfie. So it's not just his kind of side projects, but he should have loads of dosh. Yeah. I would say he should be in America already. Yeah. But there we go. I'm just saying. I think he just has that feeling that the club's teetering on the brink. Remember, it's in a currently safe zone in Soho, probably quite close to the lines, effectively the war lines that have been drawn around London. So I kind of think he does know that somebody's going to come in and take that club out from underneath him. Yeah, it's precarious, isn't it? Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, for sure. I think just also on the champagne, I have never drank champagne from those types of glasses. The ones that you do see from like the 20s and 30s. Yeah. That kind of almost like a cocktail glass now. You kind of get margaritas in it or something. It's always a flute glass. That's right. If I have like sparkles, rather than that. So I'm like going, I wonder when the switch happened on that, when it became more fashionable to have it in a flute glass. I know, apologies, fellow governors. This is a slight sidetrack, but it's just kind of how my mind worked when I saw them swigging out of, I suppose, ye olde champagne glasses. Yeah, I know what you mean. That's the one that the reason why I know it I've seen it so often, I suppose, is that it's the clip from Great Gatsby with Leonardo DiCaprio cheersing. That's been turned into a GIF for celebrating everything. Yeah, he's using that glass. He's not using a champagne. And the champagne tower that they normally do, where they stack all the glasses into a pyramid and then pour the expensive bubbles across the whole of the pyramid. Fill up the glasses. Yes, good period details there from Bruno Heller and Danny Cannon. It is. But one of the things I suppose that comes out of this discussion between Baz and Dave Boy and Alfie is that they haven't told anybody that they're going. Understandable, as we say, they're in the middle of a war that's going on all around them. So Alfie's kind of explanation that if he tells anybody, it's as good as telling the Raven League they're leaving and going to put a target on their back, and telling the police effectively going to put a target, and more of a target on their back. But I kind of like his plan is just to kind of leave a note behind with some money for whoever else is going to take over the club after they leave. Yeah, it's interesting with Sandy, isn't it? As Sandy's father said, the publican from season 1. Good old Sid. Yeah, good old Sid. They are lovebirds. But I'm not entirely sure how much love is going from the Alfie to Sandy direction still. I think it's always been a little bit lopsided, and, he really, is not telling her very well that it's about his plans to go to America. Yeah. So I suspect Sandy is going to be royally disappointed. I think she might be. I love that one where she's saying that she's got her session or her possible big break, that's coming up in 3 weeks' time. She's like, you'll definitely be there, won't you, Alfie? He's like, I'll try my best. Not covering up. She said, what do you mean you try your best? You have to be there. And he's like, things happen and things might get in the way between now and then. You never know, Sandy. Yes. I suppose Alfie is praying for the Raven Union to attack on that night. Maybe, yeah. Exactly. Maybe. It's good to see Sandy back properly in this episode. We kind of mentioned last episode that she was there, but seeing her with Sid from The Severed Arms, it's kind of, at least confirmation that we were right, that that's the correct character. Because, she had a minor role towards the end of the season last season. So great to kind of get all the backstory here about what's happened to her over the previous year, that they've now moved into this kind of phase of her life where she's hopefully going to become a star and he's going to be her bodyguard, kind of thing, that big fantasy that's going on, that she'll have her boyfriend as her bodyguard protecting her as she travels the world with her music, Well, that's it. And also, as you say, it's good to see Sid back as well. Mm-hmm. It's nice to have that little cameo from him. I think as well, what is also difficult for Alfie is with his mum. And this was one aspect I really liked. I mean, first off, again, just those nice little touches where he's saying, you're on the sherry and chips with Bonanza on the TV. Mm-hmm. That was just really good. What might the neighbours say? It's just the idea of sherry and chips as a combination. Just doesn't sound right. I think it's also time of day as well, because Alfie keeps pushing you need to be drinking a cup of tea right now. Yeah, exactly. Not sherry and chips. Yeah. So his mum is basically, drowning her sorrows, trying to deal with the death of her husband, the whole thing with Alfie being there, and kind of his involvement in that whole explosive end to episode 1, by swigging swigging off the old sweet sherry, you know, and this was a really nice, difficult moment here. It wasn't really an argument, but, you know, she just kind of lays it on Alfie that he was complicit in his own father's death when Alfie tries to, you know, invoke the spirit of his dad to try and snap his mum out of the sherry at 10 in the morning. And
pull your socks up.
Yeah, and, you know, she really is not wanting to move to America at all. And it's almost like, because she wants something back that is never going to happen because her husband's dead.
Yeah.
But she feels like that can only happen in England, not in the US.
Yeah.
And obviously they have animals that will kill you on sight there, like bears, cougars, that kind of stuff.
I love that she's saying, you know, but in America, I just heard on the news that, a man died when a bear had a go at him, you know, it's kind of funny. I did wonder from the scene, from the conversation with Alfie, where she's saying the neighbors whisper behind her back, that's the woman whose son murdered his dad. I wonder whether Alfie's been able to tell her the true story of what happened, or whether he's kind of protecting his father's reputation a little bit by not saying that he was there with the bomb, pressing the button, and Alfie shot him in the arm. Remember, he didn't kill his father. Yeah. He shot him in the arm, and the bomb went off afterwards, killing his father and some of the other attendees at that big party at the end of last season. So is Alfie maybe protecting his father's reputation a little bit by kind of taking, or is he taking the blame like Alfie has done throughout season 1? Is he taking some more of the blame on board because it's easier for him to deal with?
And to protect his mum. I think so. I think matters are then complicated further because his mum gets kidnapped. And like initially I was thinking, ooh, is this something from John Salt, that, you know, because he mentioned his father, Alfie's father, being a hero to the Union, that somehow he was wanting to kidnap and it may be in his mind rescue his mum so that she could be part of the Union, that law. But I thought it was initially the Raven Union that could have been coming in and kidnapping her. But I think more and more it's most likely to be Captain Gully,
yes,
who we saw in the last episode because he knows of this money being accrued by Alfie.
Yeah.
But she's held ransom for 20,000, and I just love this moment with the boys, with Dave Boy and Bazza helping Alfie to go to rescue her. Actually, just on a side, Dave Boy has some really nice moments in this episode. There's a moment where they're coming together to go and rescue her, and he's fast asleep in one of the booths in the club, and you just see him raise up, and it's just like, that is perfect Dave Boy, for sure.
That's again been his introduction 2 episodes now. He's just been asleep in the background.
Yeah, he's sleeping off the liquor from the night before, and also then just, you know, when he realizes that the money is the ransom, and this puts the USA in jeopardy for them, and that he goes, you know, this effectively can't happen. I've got an appointment with Doris Day. Really nice touches, I think, for me.
Yeah, absolutely. I really, really enjoy these guys together. It's really good fun seeing their plans to travel over to the US together. It's kind of cool. You know, even Bazza learning how to play Texas Hold'em and kind of giving out about how random the game is. You know, he's like, oh, well, if I have to learn it, I'll learn it, you know, kind of thing. But he's also saying to Alfie, he's going. This is not something that they're going to do together, all 3 of them. He's saying, Baz is telling Alfie, he's definitely going on the road, no matter what kind of things could be holding Alfie back. Baz is definitely getting on that plane and getting out of there as soon as they get some money. And unfortunately, this has knocked them all back. 20k is a significant amount of money, that Alfie's had to hand over here, you know. But I think you're right. Yeah, I think, by virtue of the fact they have a very big actor in the role of Gully, and we saw him for a moment last episode, without the mask on. We did see him in more of the episode, but only for a moment without the mask on. You kind of get the feeling that Gully's got a much bigger importance. He's the one that knew they had the money, and the only other person that knew anything about it is Aziz, and he was there at the end, trying to arrest or trying to find this other accomplice of Alfie's, effectively.
Exactly. I mean, first off, I think Gully probably got the incompetent soldiers from that division.
True.
Because I love the comedy value of Alfie, you know, negotiating and saying, I want to see my mother before I hand over the money. And then in the back of the car, it just plays out really nicely, the interaction where he ends up being in the power position. And in the end, you think this is all going to play out quite nicely for Alfie.
Yeah.
Ultimately, in the end, it all heads south because of the insertion of Inspector Aziz into the proceedings, which we see earlier in the episode, you know, that he's convinced that the recapture of Colonel Salt was because it was down to Alfie, playing both sides effectively. And so they've been following him. So that's the reason why for their involvement here.
Yeah.
But again,
he tells Martha he's 87% sure that Alfie was involved.
Exactly.
True inspector, true detective.
And I think what this negotiation for me was just so good because, I thought the argument, you know, the little Barney that's going on between Alfie and his mum, where she's still in the caravan, he's outside, and she goes, you know, that money's for my grandchildren, if you have any. You know, it's just really nice little mother-son kind of play on, you know, why are you here? Why are you saving me? Why are you wasting the money? You know, this is for your new life. This is for your grandchildren, if you have any. Yeah. Like, I thought this was really well written, well played, and well observed, I think, you know, in terms of how it played out. Really nice.
Absolutely. One of the fun things that I liked about this whole concept of the kidnappers coming in, I love that they call his mom beforehand and went, is Alfie home? Which he says no. It's like, all right, just checking. And they're in the door. You hear the car pull up or speed up outside. And that whole conversation with the two kidnappers, or with the one kidnapper saying, I need to see my mom. And then you kind of get that, I need to go and check with my boss thing. And Alfie knows, okay, these guys aren't the brightest tools in the shed.
Exactly.
Yeah, really good stuff in that scene. But yeah, this does put quite a big barrier between Alfie and the boys to get over to the USA. So that kind of has, as the title of the episode, it has burnt that bridge effectively that they have. Also in this scene, the other burning bridge, I think that the episode title is referring to is the burning of the bridge, really between Inspector Aziz and Alfie. Not that Alfie and him had any trust after everything that happened in season 1. There was no trust between them, but at least Aziz was able to go to Alfie with jobs, and they kind of had a almost little bit of respect, but it looks like that's gone now by the wayside after everything he's done here. So
yeah, it really does seem as though Alfie's plan has just begun to crumble, really.
Yeah. That's kind of it for Alfie and the boys. Let's talk about the Raven Union, because lots going on over on the other side, outside of London, let's say. We get the return of Mrs. Gaunt, Frances Gaunt, from season 1, who was also in prison with Lord Harwood. Still no mention of how they actually got out of that prison. When we saw them all standing beside each other, Peggy, Beth, Lord Harwood and Frances Gaunt in the Tower of London at the end of season 1, but still no discussion about how they got out of that situation.
Absolutely. I mean, I don't know whether we will, but it was great to see Frances Gaunt back here with Lord Harwood. It's a really interesting relationship, isn't it? Because I'm constantly thinking that Harwood is going to stab her in the back. Yet he does seem to value her opinion. There does seem to be, an element of respect and trust there. But maybe the Project Stormcloud, and that operation to effectively, chemically attack, these enclaves of resistance of the English League is something that Frances is definitely not up for. And she's a little bit miffed that Harwood has kept this project, out of her line of sight, really.
I love how British you're getting as we're watching.
I know.
A little bit miffed, yes. But yes, she's much more practical in the way that she wants to do things here. She wants to win. Like that's effectively, she does want to win, but she's not willing to take the leaps that Harwood wants to take. You know, this conversation that they have about Stormcloud and why Harwood thinks it's important effectively is he wants to have the entire country back, all of his enemies dead, and all the buildings still standing in place. And by using chemical weaponry, that's what will happen. You'll have the cost of lives, of course, but you won't have the cost of buildings. And Frances is horrified by this idea that, this surreptitious way of killing everybody rather than, battles on the battlefield. She's kind of okay with that. But Harwood's trying to say there is a moral argument in this where, it's just as bad as bombs being dropped, but you will have the building standing afterwards. And she's kind of horrified by that discussion. as you say, she does calm him down, and he does agree that this is it, that he will end the program. Any possibility he'll end the program, Tom?
Probably not. Probably
I don't
not.
think so.
I mean, I do like Harwood's little sort of bite back at her where they've been looking for options to try and sort of, stop the deadlock and to really push their advantage. And he goes, well, this is an option for you. You wanted options.
Yeah.
But yeah, he seems to climb down, but I suspect that's not going to happen. And of course, you have the great smarminess of John Salt there in the room whilst this is going on. Being just very officious. I mean, it really is kind of a nice way of just showing that kind of authoritarian regime. It's a bit like with Bet Sykes trying to get in contact with Lord Harwood in the episode as well, having to go through all these operators.
Yeah.
And ultimately it's like, well, you're not on the list. It's like death by bureaucracy. It does remind me of, Futurama with, the 101 bureaucracy building, just really, forms for everything. It's like, oh, goodness me.
Absolutely. When she gets to the final receptionist, trying to call Lord Harwood, and it's like, I'm a personal friend, put me through to him. That's not how it works, love. You're on the list, and then hangs up. Like, how are they supposed to get in contact? Remember, obviously, 1960s, no mobile phones. She's calling from a phone box to try and get in contact with Harwood. So, what this woman was thinking when the secretary, what she was thinking, saying to her, we've got your message, we'll get back to you. Well, there's no way you're going to be able to get back to Bet. I wonder if they will go as far in the show as Bet actually does meet up with that receptionist at some point.
I hope so, because I reckon the phone is going to be shoved somewhere where the sun doesn't shine.
Absolutely.
I have to say, just on a side note, it did make me giggle because you've got this huge kind of, concrete headquarters of the Raven Union stuck in the middle of the countryside. And it was just as the wide shot of it, as it was moving in before it went into the scene with Francis Gaunt and Harwood.
Yes.
All you could hear was the sheep bleating, and you looked and there were all these sheep around it, and it's like, this is the most unlikely place for a building of that size and look to have been built. Has it always been there?
Yeah.
Was it built after they gotten out of prison? I just found it really, really comical. In the end, I have grown to love this ridiculous, massive HQ in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by sheep, just barring and bleating and you name it. I've just got this vision of like the local farmer sort of just still, herding his sheep whilst this whole massive edifice is there with like Operation Stormcloud going on inside it.
I did wonder,
Project Stormcloud.
Yeah, I wondered if it was a former power station that they'd converted or something like that. That's what it feels like. And yeah, the actual setup of the scene, the establishing shot of the scene does remind me of, The Simpsons with the nuclear power station, when every time it arrives, you hear that crow call.
Yeah.
That's the initiation of a scene at the power plant. And this one is this massive, massive, huge building in the middle of Watford with sheep all around it buying away.
Well, that's it. It's like, I just love the ridiculousness of it.
Yeah. I swear if we go back to season 1, we'll probably see that building in there somewhere
probably
as well that we've just forgotten from season 1. So our apologies if we have forgotten. Let's talk a little bit more about Bet Sykes. Also still kind of a member of the Raven Union. At least she's still wearing her uniform to begin with in this episode, as she's standing at the bus stop in that hilarious moment trying to get away from they're on the run here. They're trying to get away really quickly but have to wait for a bus. The public transport system in the US isn't well known for being on time. There's a lot of jokes about how poorly timed it is, but she looks like she's there for hours.
Do you know, it's so familiar to me that kind of scene, a bus stop literally again in the middle of nowhere on a country lane. With a bus service that's once every 3 hours or something like that. Yeah. And this was just so nicely done. The bloke there waiting seemingly to go to his office job, and then Bet and her hostage. And of course, after this whole scene, just as it ends, no bus in sight, and Bet Sykes stands up, walks out, looks both ways, and is like, now where's this, effing bus? Exactly. It's just so well done.
And after taking his jacket as well, taking his coat, I love his reaction to it when she's like, give me your coat. He's just kind of looking at her going, what is this woman talking about? I put on my coat this morning because I knew I'd be waiting 3 hours for a bus. But yeah, it's a really familiar scene if you've lived in the UK or Ireland, or on the outskirts of any town. I remember when I lived on the outskirts of Dublin and in Shankill in Ireland, when I lived there for a year, we used to go out on Saturday evenings. You'd walk down the road at 7:30 in the evening to go into town to meet your mates. And it could be 2 or 3 hours before a bus arrives. And you'd literally just go back home and go, I guess we've missed the pub tonight. We've just spent our night standing at a bus stop waiting to go to town. So it is a familiar sight, when there are, poor transport systems. But I'm sure during wartime as well. Like, remember the whole country's at war at the moment. So maybe not too much blame in the way of the bus company.
No, but I think with Bette Sykes in this episode, it was like, I'm kind of not clear yet what the deal is yet now with her, because, she killed her superior officer. She's on the run. She knows she's on the run. She knows that word is getting out, yet she's looking to get in touch with Lord Harwood, because she's a close personal friend. She wants to set the record straight, and she's still keeping her prisoner, the leaguer, Katie Browning, with her. And she's still trying to get information out of her. And yeah, it's a little strange. I mean, ultimately, when she fails to get in touch with Lord Harwood, she tries to contact her sister Peggy.
That's right.
So I'm really pleased about that, because I hope Peggy is back in the next few episodes. Because I think their dynamic is superb. But I'm just like, is she a committed Raven unionist, I suppose, or is she kind of a little bit more fluid? And what's her deal with her prisoner? Because, she's helped her escape, and you're like, what's the reason for that? And yet in this episode, she's trying to still validate whether she knows anything or not by asking her to draw. She brings the pencils and the paper and says, draw. You said you're an artist, now draw me.
Yeah.
I do like that scene, because I like the pose that Paloma Faith puts on for her. It's real, like, portrait look. It's
she's totally channeling the queen there.
Exactly. But it's also just, it's in this really, there's this abandoned house, that's probably cold, damp, and you've got blood up the walls.
Yep. Somebody was executed in that house, definitely.
It's really still unclear to me. She's basically running from nowhere to the middle of nowhere. And what is her goal here?
So the way I probably saw it within the episode here is that, yes, she is a close personal friend of Harwood. She's went to prison with him,
exactly.
And she saved him as well, remember? So she should be on the path to glory here. Maybe in the leadership room is what she feels. She was sent off to be a captain in the interrogation center, effectively, off miles away from Peggy, her sister, and miles away from the leadership team. And then this man who claimed to be her superior officer came in, tried to rape Katie Browning in front of her, and sent her off to make a cup of tea like she was nothing. So she's out. And she wants to make sure that Harwood knows that this is not what she was expecting to be given as a prize for bringing him back from the streets, effectively, and putting him back into his leadership role. That's where she is. That's why she's so angry. But I think she also has some feelings for Katie Browning, possibly because Katie, as an artist, if she is one, we still have that question open here, but if she is an artist, that's a very free kind of life to be living. Whereas Bette has said the reason that she's in this position is because, well, that's where she's supposed to be. That's where life has put her, basically. Yeah. Whereas Katie Browning is free enough to be an artist and do something creative with her life, It feels like Bette was feeling very trapped, where she was, and was put there by the person that should be giving her the perfect role to live a great, existence, effectively. Whereas Bette had to go by everything. You hear her talk about the interrogation center, where she's saying to Katie, you are a terrorist because the machines say you are, and the machines are from America. They wouldn't lie. They know that you're a terrorist, even though I have my doubts that you might be a terrorist, because you don't seem really up for it. You can't really stand the sight of blood, which I would have thought all terrorists were fine with, kind of thing.
You're soft for a terrorist. I did like,
But the machines say it, so therefore if the machines are wrong, maybe everything's wrong. So she's questioning her whole existence, questioning everything about herself. And also, I think there's some feelings for Katie. I think there's definitely some sexual tension once again with Beth. We don't know much about what's going on in her personal life. From last season, we don't know whether she's a lesbian. We don't know whether she's bisexual, but there was definitely some moments last season where you did question, her sexuality, I think. Throughout the first season. And I think now with Katie, I think there's a little sexual tension between the two of them. Or at least on Beth's side.
I think so. And I think as well, just, back in episode 1, she just says, we have to fill our quotas, so just say something. So I think on the basis of that, and then coming up against Katie, who wouldn't cave to those demands, I think there's maybe some kind of grudging respect for her, a bit of attraction, and also just the place of women in the Raven Union, possibly with what happened with their superior officer, not being able to get through to Lord Harwood, feeling, say, cheated, as you say. I think it's just, I want to see, maybe it's more about where this ends up. Will she be with Alfie at the end of it? Will it be too much for her to take, or will it be something where she's able to accept and she's still on the side of the Raven Union? So it's more that for me.
Yeah, I agree. I really want to see that showdown with Lord Harwood, that moment where she's effectively telling him this is not how I imagined it to be. But that scene with Katie, that really did feel like paint me like one of your northern girls. The kind of Titanic reference where it's like, sit there and draw me. Oh, you don't want to draw me, do you not?
Absolutely.
Yeah, so if she does have any kind of attraction to Katie Browning, I think that's going to be a terrifying situation to be in. It feels like almost like Beth's a bit of a serial killer. It feels like I get what I want.
Yeah.
And if Katie's not interested, which she probably shouldn't be, because Beth's pretty seriously dangerous as a woman. That moment where she has the fight with the two members of the Raven League, beats them up, encourages Katie effectively, waits around for Katie to hit one of them over the back of the head, and then stabs both of them in the throat with a broken bottle to kill them. Like, that's brutal. That feels more serial killer-like than someone trying to get out of a dangerous situation.
Well, I did like her finishing the job. It kind of reminded me a bit of Zombieland, where it's like, you have the double tap, and it's like Beck Sykes is just really making sure that these guys don't get back up and follow them further, or as she said, to report back. And so the bottle in the neck, and you see Katie really, again, the idea that she's a little too soft for a terrorist. So maybe there's some grain of truth in what she's saying, although she didn't seem to be too enthusiastic about drawing. So maybe there is something still there. I think as well, just the other little reference to her coming back with supplies to have a picnic in this blood-stained, sort of mouldy, damp house. And I mean, there are cheese and ham butties, and then there are cheese and ham sandwiches. And I suspect this one is really, that real soft white bread, the thinly sliced ham, the sort of very bland cheese, but I like the fact that it's washed down with a bottle of Tizer. I remember Tizer as a kid. I haven't had it in years.
I don't know whether that made it over to Ireland.
I think it's like red lemonade, basically. So I think it's that effectively. Okay. But I love
a dash
Tizer.
of vodka with it might
well, yeah, that was to help warm them up. But I hadn't seen Tizer in ages.
That's mad, isn't it? Yeah, that they have the stuff. Like, it does feel almost like a war ration-y type of conversation. But I like I like that Beth's kind of playing the housewife here. It's like, I've got some bread, I've got some ham, I've got some cheese, and I got some Tizer for us. We'll have a nice little picnic. It's like, that is not what the woman who's just been handcuffed to a staircase for 4 or 5 hours is expecting when she comes back. Anything else on the Raven Union for this point, John?
No, that's all from me.
All right, let's get on to the English League. English League themselves not playing a massive part in this episode. We do see at the beginning of the episode, we see that Martha is shooting a few shots at the speaker systems that
stop the propaganda.
Exactly, that are sending the propaganda into London. And then that's kind of it for her for the episode. But we do see a round table.
Yeah, we see the High
League.
Council.
Yeah, exactly. The English League leaders and some interesting representatives in there. I see John Ripper in there, the descendant of Jack the Ripper, we believe, from London history. We saw him back in season 1, the Gravedigger, from season 1. Seems to be very interested in keeping the cities of England safe, all of them, Manchester, Liverpool and London. And I love that there is this discussion. If you're not from the UK, you may not recognize this constant discussion that goes on, which is the centralization, of policy dictates.
It's the north-south divide.
Yeah, absolutely. But it's very much, everybody I've talked to, John is from Northern England, and I talked to a lot of his friends and family, and very much the attitude in Northern England is that London makes the decisions for London and forgets about the rest of the country. So I like that this came out in this conversation between the really poorly organised English League. Once again, they seem to do a lot of infighting all the time and don't really make much movement. Remember, they've only got 3 cities and one town, effectively. Got Ipswich, is that right? Or
they've got London, Liverpool, Manchester. Then there's Norfolk and Cornwall. Because I do like the fact here that there's kind of the battle, this north-south divide battle between John Ripper, who's wanting to save Liverpool and Manchester as well as London, and then there's Victor who's saying, that they should just be sacrificed and we focus on London. And then Bishop Potter allows the Woodcraft folk to have the table, and they're from Cornwall. Yeah. And, he says, this is getting very London centric, this discussion. But you can see there then that, John Ripper doesn't particularly want to save Cornwall, and he's like, oh no, not the Woodcraft folk. But it felt like something from the Lord of the Rings, where it's like, and now we'll allow, at Elrond's in Rivendell, we'll allow the Woodcraft folk to speak. So that was kind of funny. Yeah. I thought.
Absolutely. I don't think anybody's getting the support of the elves and the dwarves, in this conversation. It just seems like they're attacking each other, which is part of the thing that's going on in the background to Alfie's story. Why is it that the English League, they're led by the Prime Minister and the Queen of England. She's at the table as well. We see, Queen Elizabeth sitting there, taking this discussion, having the commentary and having the discussion with everybody around the table. So it's led by the Queen and the Prime Minister, yet they have only 3 strongholds left in the UK. Yeah. Everybody's moved over to the Ravens Union, or it's unionization of the UK has obviously gone a bit bigger than it would have
exactly
at any other time.
And I mean, if the English League weren't so disorganized and fractious, then you now have the CIA really. Whilst they said they were going to stay neutral, they have decided to target Bishop Potter because he has a moral stance against this newly developed bomb, the hydrogen bomb that we see, and the CIA are asking Thomas Wayne to intervene to try and discredit him in some way. So that's kind of an interesting turn of events, because whilst they were saying they would remain neutral, this course of action, even though it's not necessarily directly aimed at this civil war in England, is going to undermine the English League even further potentially, and cause it to be kind of rudderless without a leader for a time.
Yeah. But at the very least, from the CIA's point of view, it's more just about getting rid of, regardless of whether he's part of the Raven Union or the English League, it's about getting rid of someone that has power and has a moral stance against the hydrogen bomb for them. It's not specifically about undermining the English League, which is important to note, and also really important.
But that's a side effect.
Yeah, exactly. But also really important that it kind of confirms what we thought last week. We kind of heard it in a line of dialogue that the Prime Minister is the Archbishop. That's quite a significant change that wouldn't happen in current society in the UK. You wouldn't have an archbishop who would get into that kind of position of power. So the separation of church and state in the UK is very important. That's a very important thing that happened back to Oliver Cromwell's time, right? So
yeah, basically.
So what we're saying here is that may not have happened in the DC universe.
And Henry VIII.
Well, yes.
But started with Henry VIII.
Yeah. But what we're saying here is in the DC's version of London, this never happened. The separation of church and state is actually, is not there because we have the Queen and an Archbishop who is the Prime Minister sitting on this board of the English League. So that's just an interesting little DC touch from Danny Cannon and Bruno Heller.
It is. And I think the really interesting thing here now is that Thomas Wayne, you can see he's uncomfortable with what his boss from the CIA is proposing, but he, he stays the course and goes to an old satanic friend, if a friend is the right word, in Aleister Crowley.
The return of John Joe O'Neill. Yes.
Yeah, the Satanist, and all to, effectively undermine, discredit Potter, Bishop Potter. And this was great seeing him back. He really plays, it nice and creepily. Certainly in Delaney's bar, where they have the meat to, and the proposal to go after Bishop Potter. And, just for Crowley, it's the trophy of getting an archbishop and undermining, that.
Yeah.
I do think maybe it's not as much of a challenge at all, given, some of the scandal that's come out around church. I think you could probably just dig into a few records of schools and what have you. But nonetheless, Crowley takes it a little further. And I do like the fact that he's seemingly wanting to pull the archbishop into some sort of satanic rituals so that the bishop understands what he is supposedly preaching against, because he can't quite imagine or go to that place if he just tries it, to close his eyes and think about it. And I thought that was kind of really dark, actually. But it almost reminded me of the Bishop of Bath and Wells from the Blackadder series in Blackadder 2, who is effectively a huge pervert, and does money laundering, and ultimately has to sort of gets exposed by Blackadder in one of the episodes. And I feel that this may go in a similar direction.
Yeah, I kind of felt when the proposal came from Thomas Wayne that effectively, Aleister Crowley is quite high up in the Raven Society, but doesn't have any power within them because effectively of who he is, and that he is a Satanist and everybody knows that. He's kind of used as the wet ops person. He's the person that's used to take care of the things that nobody else wants to take care of, is how it's said. I kind of thought that was going to be, Thomas was going to him because he already had the information on Archbishop Potter. But it turns out he's going to encourage him to enter the dark world of Aleister Crowley. I suppose that kind of plays on season 1. It plays on who the character was in season 1. We had these very moral characters of Martha and Thomas going to visit him, and Thomas's sister, who's more well known for her dabbling in every type of activity from drugs and drink to Satanism, effectively. But we saw that his sister got caught up in Crowley's world, and then Thomas and Martha were both dragged into it. Even though, as I say, they were both quite moral characters. So having Aleister Crowley kind of use this as his plan, that he's going to pervert the bishop into learning, that idea of, I could tell you, but it would be probably more of an experience for me to show you, kind of thing. He's really playing the part like Lucifer.
He really is. He is a corrupter, and he's doing it in person, one-on-one with the Archbishop, which I think is really interesting. And I think, Thomas Wayne has a nice description of him is, you are the carrion bird who does the Raven Union dirty work, which I think is quite nice.
Exactly.
And ultimately this is a chance for Crowley to sort of become more prominent within the Raven Union, and it also is a way for him to get a kiss from Thomas Wayne. Absolutely. It's like kiss. It was to seal the deal, which I thought was kind of interesting, just messing with Thomas Wayne's mind here.
Yeah. But it's kind of sealing the deal with a kiss, exactly, as you say, it's, that Aleister would try and corrupt the uncorruptible father of Batman. So I just think that's an interesting little touch. One final thing that I have on just the Thomas Wayne piece as well, cause it was right at the start of the episode, Aziz seems to be encouraging Martha to use her womanly ways to get back in with Thomas Wayne, which once again, we know the future of these characters is that they're together and they're the father and mother of Batman. Bruce Wayne. But I think it's kind of interesting that part of the setup of the relationship could be coming from being pushed by political means to get together.
Absolutely.
Just an interesting little touch.
Yeah, no, I think that is a really kind of interesting touch. And at the moment, Martha and Thomas just seem so far apart. You can't really envision them coming together to be the mother and father of Bruce Wayne, but so that's just, it is kind of nice having that situation, because, you know, in Batman comics, in the universe, it is just that they're always just the couple and the alleyway. And that's what's so good about this show, is that sort of background, that them being together was never inevitable like you just have in the comic books, really.
Yeah, exactly.
But the other thing about the kiss from Thomas Wayne with Crowley is that, you know, I think he really does hit the nerve. Crowley says, you know, in relation to the CIA, you're already sold, so this is just a gesture of friendship for your soul. You know, that Thomas Wayne has been bought. His moral compass in that sense, has gone from the first season. He's just doing the bidding of CIA, even though he knows it's not what he would do. He's just following orders. So he's sold his soul already. So what does this kiss matter to you? Kiss, you know? Yeah. So I thought that was quite a nice little, sort of sucker punch, really, from Crowley to Thomas Wayne.
Because I kind of thought that was a reference to how far Thomas had been pushed when he was at Crowley's last time, you know, with Ripper's nephew, wasn't it? Where
it could be as
he was
well.
Pushed so far to violence that
possibly
he almost killed him.
But I was taking it in the context of the fact that he was approaching Crowley for this. That's how bad it was.
Yeah.
I just, you know, Thomas would never go back to him. That's the history.
Exactly.
And he hates him. Well, and so that this is how desperate or just how much he has sold out to against his principles. Yeah, and I thought that was kind of interesting.
I see that. I kind of get the feeling that Aleister Crowley might be the Joker almost for Thomas Wayne in London here, the person he may have to almost team up with sometimes against his better judgment. Not that Batman ever teams up with the Joker, but I just kind of feel like they have the kind of exact opposite to each other.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I just wanted to note about that scene as well with Alistair and Thomas. Sherry didn't really take care of him the way that Alfie had indicated she should. He kind of Alfie had been in the club, obviously, when Alistair and Thomas had the first meeting, and that's the first time Thomas has met up with Alfie this season. Definitely some kind of rubbing the wrong way, but Alfie tells Sherry to make sure that they're taken care of. They both ordered their drinks, a G&T and a milk, of course, for Thomas Wayne.
Just to really highlight purity versus
decadence,
evil and decadence.
Yeah, yes, exactly. But they never arrive. Throughout their whole conversation. And it's not like they're not having a long enough conversation that she could have gotten a G&T, which takes about 30 seconds to prepare, and a glass of milk delivered.
Well, in all honesty, Delaney's, I'm kind of like going, he wants milk. Well, they probably had to run out to the corner shop to get it. I mean, I know a White Russian will have milk in it.
Yeah.
But I'm just there going,
they always have milk, because it's England, John. Everybody has a cup of tea wherever they go. So you have to have milk on tap. This is a club.
This is kind of like...
Doesn't matter, Tom.
This is hard liquor club. They probably like going, milk.
Yeah, but this is for a friend of Alfie's. You know, I wonder if...
Like when people order like 0% beer in like a pub, it's like, just get a water or something.
That's allowed. It's like when I ordered a steak in an Indian restaurant, which was really bad as well. So yeah, that was also terrible. They did have to go to the corner shop for that.
They really did. The actual Indian food was gorgeous. You just chose the wrong type of food in the wrong type of restaurant.
I did, of course. But no, I was just wondering whether maybe Alfie's phrase that he said to Sherry, is that a little opposite of what he was saying? Was he saying to Sherry, treat him the way you treat my best friends? You know, quotation marks, you know, meaning, exactly. Meaning this is a person that gets nothing from me for free kind of thing. That's just a quick note that I had on their conversation, but that's an interesting one, you know. Remember last season when we had Aleister Crowley, in there, it was a very psychedelic episode. There was a lot of confusing stuff going on in there, and I wonder whether we'll see a bit of that, with Archbishop Potter, or will that be left for our own imaginations to see where Aleister Crowley takes him, what journey he takes him on.
Well, you would think as well, because Potter does recognise Aleister Crowley, so I'm kind of there thinking, why would he kind of open himself up to this? Because he must know, being the Prime Minister, they must have some intel that he's with the Raven Union and he does stuff for them, so I'm kind of like going, okay, well, let's see how this plays out.
It is really a long time since I heard intelligence and Prime Minister in the same sentence.
Well, that
John.
is true.
I know this was the 60s, but you would expect that. I kind of got the feeling from the scene that, the CIA were actually on track a little bit, with Archbishop Potter, that potentially there is actually something about him that they think he would be open, let's say, to the decadence that Aleister Crowley would be peddling.
Yeah.
I kind of got that feeling that that even Crowley knew there's possibly something there with trying to pervert this Archbishop.
Yeah, exactly.
I just wonder if that's what was in there. We'll definitely see more of that next episode. That's it for our overall discussion on Pennyworth, season 2, episode 2. John, anything else to talk about that we haven't talked about in the episode?
No, not from me.
Well, what did you think of the episode overall, John?
I thought there were lots of nice little bits in this episode. I don't think it's the best episode. Mm-hmm. I would give this 3.5 bottles of Fizzy Tizer out of 5.
Okay.
It moves the story along. It really sets up, we kind of had the dive in at the deep end and straight into it with action and a really good first episode.
Yeah.
This feels now like, because of the time jump and because it is a whole new story, this is just laying the foundation of that story a bit further and really putting the characters in the places to set up sort of some of the story threads over the next few episodes, or maybe for the entire series.
Absolutely required, without a doubt.
And it is. Yeah. But I think they keep the whole spirit of that. So to me, it just felt a little functional at times. But it has the spirit of Pennyworth in there with Alfie and the boys, their interaction, Alfie's interaction with his mum, just, the little, Bet Sykes again with some great lines, I think is always a standout for me.
Yeah.
But, bringing back, Aleister Crowley, it is a really nice moment as well. At least seeing a bit more, even though it was still limited, with Francis Gaunt and Lord Harwood, because they weren't really in the first episode in the same way.
No, they were just on camera, weren't they?
Yeah,
Just,
and the same.
It was only Harwood that was
exactly,
on camera.
and the same way with the High Council. So, there were some great lines in this again, some really funny moments and just funny, weird observations that I really liked in this. So overall, 3.5 bottles of Fizzy Tizer out of 5.
Nice. Yeah, I agree with you. There's a couple of good things about the episode as well. You're in season 2 now, so to expand the world almost, or to keep showing that this is a world, it's good to have characters back from season 1. As you mentioned, Aleister Crowley, seeing John Ripper back, and the Council, seeing Francis Gaunt back, even seeing Sid Onslow back, the father of Sandy, Alfie's sort of girlfriend. Even seeing him back in the show, you see that there is this world still there. There is
Definitely.
still all these characters from season 1 that are coming back. So that's a good thing. You're right though. I wonder, we've mentioned this before. We're recording these in advance of the release date, and we actually don't know the release schedule for the episodes. We know that episode 1 is coming out on the 13th of December. Episode 2 should be out on the 20th of December. But we know last year with Epix that they did release a few episodes. They put them back to back or release them on the same day. I wonder if they're going to do that this year. Will they put episode 3 on the same weekend? Because, as we said, holidays are coming. Perhaps they want to put 2 episodes on the same night. I think it might work better like that, to have this kind of setup episode with episode 3 set directly after it, potentially. But just intrigued to see what's coming up on the next episode now that we have all this set up here.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks so much for joining us for our episode 2 podcast. We got some feedback in on episode 1. First up, we've got an email from Will B. He says, "Hello, gents. It's so great to have you podcasting again. I really enjoyed the fact that the actor who plays Baza gave you guys a shout out. That was really special. First, I think it's a fair point about it being weird that this is an English show with English humour and cultural references being made for an American audience. However, I will say we aren't all lost on British culture and dialogue. Many of us are big consumers of TV movies made in the UK. We do have this little streaming platform called Netflix over here too. I'm a big fan myself of Luther, The Crown, Doctor Who, Crims, etc. So it definitely isn't going totally over my head." Thanks for that, Will. Yeah, I think I wasn't 100% clear on what I was trying to say. I think it was more that it's being made by an American company for an American audience, and we don't get it till 6 months later, I think was more what I meant. It wasn't really that people in America don't understand it. People are big fans of UK shows over there, totally understand that. But I do find it funny that in the UK, the show's coming out 3 or 4 months later in the first season. I think they've just announced that season 2 is coming out on January 29th, but that's still, the full season has aired by the time that comes out. So
yeah,
that's why I thought it was just interesting.
Yeah, and I mean, some of the turns of phrases can be maybe culture specific,
absolutely.
for sure. But yeah, I mean, there's quite a lot on Netflix there to consume.
Yes.
If you want.
I think if you've watched Luther, you'll definitely get the tone of some of the things that the characters on this show say.
Definitely,
as well.
definitely.
Will continues, as for this episode, I am so glad that we're able to give us something good to close out this miserable year known as 2020. The first takeaway that I had was that, and maybe this is just me, but Salt is terrifying. Something about the calm and collected psychopath of villains just shake me to the bone. So naturally, when he escaped, I'll bet sooner than I expected, I immediately began to worry about what's to come for the boys. Loved Paloma Faith's performance this episode. I really don't know which direction her character is leaning right now, but generally, you get fired if you bludgeon your boss to death, even if he is pond scum. Also, I'm looking forward to her interactions with Katie Browning, as I foresee her having a positive moral influence on Captain Sykes. Looking forward to the rest of the season and the great podcast that will come from it. Well, I'm off to have a cuppa. Ta-ta, chaps. Will. Thanks so much, Will. Some great points there. Yeah, totally agree with you. Salt is absolutely terrifying.
Yeah, thanks, Will. Yeah, Salt will be an interesting one to watch. Just see how his character maybe will be bigger than what it is maybe at the moment, or whether he is just, around this, Stormcloud project. And Paloma Faith, totally agree. I think, she is one of the actors in this that absolutely makes the show.
Yeah.
She's got great presence. I love the dialogue that is written for her. I love how she delivers it.
Absolutely.
And, it's so good. Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. Thanks so much for your feedback. Hopefully you join us for the rest of the podcast, Will. I'm sure you will.
Yeah, thanks so much, Will, again. Over on our Facebook group at facebook.com/groups/TV podcast industries, Roger Sprong said, one of my favourite small moments was when Alfie's mum answered the phone and it was the Queen, who still seems to have a thing for Alfie, but Alfie really didn't want to talk to her. Alfie giving the Queen the brush off? That is really funny. I still think this is more of an alternate reality, Alfred, and the timeline was blurred even more. The scenes in the club remind me of the 1940s. Remember Casablanca? George Orwell died in 1950, but here he's still alive, and all of the 60s references. Captain Sykes picked up from where she left off, being unpredictable, and I vote for Scones. Long O. Pronunciation.
Scones.
Yeah, totally wrong there, Roger. Sorry to say. But I'm absolutely with you that you can give a long O to the scone, even though that is weird for me to say. A chicken cutlet is basically just a chicken breast that has been sliced and pounded very thin.
Okay.
Interesting. I didn't realise that at all.
That's interesting, Roger. Yeah, that's a good one. I've never seen one of those. It's like, what's the one in Switzerland? The pork that's...
the schnitzel.
Yeah.
Yeah, and finally, Roger says, last season there were 10 episodes, and I believe there are 10 scheduled for this season too. Roger signs off with, the two of you haven't missed a beat doing the podcast. Really great. Thanks so much, Roger, for that.
Roger.
That's really nice. I know what you mean, actually. I hadn't really picked up on it, but the telephone call with the Queen and Alfie brushing her off, just because we know that, yes, Queen and Alfie did have a little flutter in Buckingham Palace together, of which no one is to know of it other than us as the audience. But that's really nice that there's a bit of tension, romantic tension there between the two, primarily from the Queen's side. And yeah, this is definitely a blurred reality. I like the idea of the Casablanca from the club. It's that smoky, it's got a lovely feel for it. And I think Danny Cannon is fantastic in the lighting, the staging, the atmosphere that he creates in bars. It's really good.
Yeah,
so
he's always had that for bars back to Gotham, hasn't he? He's always had that kind of style about him. Definitely check out his Instagram account as well, Danny Cannon over on Instagram. He has been putting up some shots. I think actually it's one of the things he was doing between season 1 and season 2. He was putting up some shots of some of the buildings and locations that they were using for Pennyworth. Check him out over there. Roger, thank you so much. It's great to be back in the world of Pennyworth. We're really enjoying being back here because it's always much more fun, I think, going back for a second season when you're podcasting, particularly on a show, because you have this whole kind of backlog of all the knowledge that you have from season 1, and then you forget things, and you have wonderful listeners like Roger who's pointing it out. So yes, we haven't missed a beat doing the podcast. We've just forgotten all the things that we should know. I think I made mention that I thought there was 8 episodes in season 2 of Pennyworth. That's totally my fault. We got the first 4 episodes of the show, and I assumed it was half of the season, but no, there is 10 episodes. I've seen that up on IMDb now. So 2 more episodes than I thought. That's great.
Yeah, really good. Thanks again, Roger, for the feedback. Really good to get your comments in.
Absolutely. One other thing that's good about coming back for a second season, some of our listeners come along in between 2 seasons and listen to the show, like Fiction Boy over on Apple Podcasts, who left us a review for our first season. He says, 5 stars, brilliant. These guys really should have more reviews. Pennyworth is a fantastic show, and these 2 hosts do a great job covering it. They're British, so that helps a lot. They pick up on a lot of the Britishisms that others wouldn't. I am glad I found this podcast. I didn't find it until episode 5 of the show, so I'm going to go back and watch from the beginning just so I can hear their recaps. It's really disheartening when you love a show and find a podcast covering it, but the hosts don't get all the references and nuances. That's what I found with another Pennyworth podcast. Fortunately, these guys know what they're doing and can break it down in a decidedly British manner. Okay, I'm off for a cuppa. Cheers. Also, I'm a Yank. That's Fiction Boy.
Thank you so much, Fiction Boy, for the review. That's really nice. Thanks so much for the review. I mean, it's just good to really get feedback and get, just so we can, keep on top of what we're doing. And of course, I suppose we do very much give a, this side of the Atlantic slant to Pennyworth.
Yes, we catch a few Irishisms and a few Scottishisms as well in the episodes too. But really nice. Hopefully you're back now for season 2 of Pennyworth as well. Thanks for leaving us that during the summer. And finally, over on Twitter, we got a piece of feedback from Patrick Lemke, who just pointed out a little connection between Gotham and Pennyworth. As we know, Danny Cannon and Bruno Heller both worked at Gotham with the character of Alfred, played by Sean Pertwee over there, the wonderful Sean Pertwee, one of our favourite characters over on the show. And he pointed out there's a connection between one scene back in season 2, episode 2 of Gotham. Patrick says, are there dark times ahead for Sid Onslow?
Well, it sounds like there could be. What a great spot from Patrick. Thanks so much for sending in the tweet, because it's a really nice spot. And of course, Danny Cannon and Bruno Heller involved in Gotham. So that kind of connected universe is really possible, with Pennyworth and Gotham. Even though it may not necessarily directly link in there, some of these nice little name drops that we, have seen in Gotham that maybe Danny Cannon and Bruno Heller are referencing within this Pennyworth universe over in Britain.
Yes, so you know what Patrick's talking about. Here's the clip.
I once knew this geezer called Onslow in the Isle of Dogs in the East End of London. Larry little scallywag he was too smiley by half. Never trusted him. Anyway, one day, Lucius, he comes bowling up to me and he asks me to do him this right iffy favour. Oh, it doesn't matter what it was. The point being, against my better judgment, I agreed to do it. But, Lucius, I told him straight. I said, you let me down, Onslow. I will tuck you up, sunshine, like a kipper. He swears blind. Swears on his mother's grave he'd never do such a thing. But of course he did. Couldn't help himself. He let me down. So I tucked him up. Like a kipper.
What is a kipper?
It's a type of smoked fish. Very nice with eggs and brown toast for breakfast.
It's a great clip, isn't it?
Yeah, really good clip.
Always great to hear Sean Pertwee's voice, especially talking about food. He's also the voice of MasterChef over here.
Yeah.
So it's great to hear him talk. And I remember all the way through Gotham, that was one of the scenes that really stood out from Sean Pertwee. I remember having to explain, took me up like a kipper, when we did our Gotham podcast as well. It's preparing a corpse like a kipper, effectively. That's what he's saying. He's tucking him up like a kipper. He's preparing him like you would serve a fish, is effectively the gag there. But the big piece to take out there is he says he once knew a geezer named Onslow in the Isle of Dogs, East End of London. Sid Onslow is the father of Alfie's current girlfriend. So will we see Sid Onslow put a task to Alfred that he will have to tuck him up like a kipper?
That would be awesome. And as I say, Patrick Lemke, great spot there.
Absolutely.
So good. I really hope it is connected. It would just make sense. And yeah, we get to see Onslow tucked up like a kipper.
I don't really
Maybe
want to
with
see
a
what that
nice
looks like.
poached egg on top on some brown toast.
Excellent. Thank you all so much for your feedback on episode 1 of the show. Hopefully we'll hear from you again. Email us over to feedback@tvpodcastindustry.com with any of your thoughts. Come on over to Twitter. You can get us on Gotham TV Podcast and on TV Pod Industries. Over on Twitter, we have 2 accounts over there, just for a bit of a laugh. You can also come over to our Facebook group, as John mentioned, to facebook.com/groups/TV Podcast Industries. I put up a spoiler post each week for each of the episodes, where you can share any thoughts you have.
Yeah. And of course, you can leave a review, on any of our podcasts, on any of the podcast catchers that are for you.
Exactly. Yes.
Good or evil.
Whether they're good or evil, or they're Raven supporting, or English League supporting.
Yes, exactly.
Thank you so much for joining us for season 2, episode 2 of Pennyworth. We'll be back next week with Pennyworth, season 2, episode 3, The Belt and Welt.
Yes, interesting title.
Yeah.
And yes, remember, fellow governors, make sure you remain subscribed to the podcast on your favorite podcast catcher of choice. You can just go to tvpodcastindustries.com to search for any groovy or ungroovy podcast catcher of your choice. And of course, if you want to share us, leave a review, rate us, because sharing the podcast is sharing the love. You can also join us over on Patreon if you want to support us in that way as well. Just head on over to patreon.com/TV Podcast Industries. But yes, it is great to have your support in any which way you decide.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thanks once again for joining us. Hope some of you are going to be able to get out to the cinema to see Wonder Woman 1984. Hopefully we're going to get to see it really soon as well. We will be covering that on the feed here on TV Podcast Industries as soon as we get to see it. I want to make sure that all 3 of us, myself, John and Chris, are all able to get out to see it, whether it's in the cinema or on streaming. And hopefully we will have it up pretty soon on this feed. So as John mentioned, make sure you stay subscribed. And we'll be back next week with episode 3. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, thanks so much, fellow governors, for joining us. As always, it is a pleasure speaking with you.
Absolutely. And enjoy your holidays, of course. If you
Yes.
celebrate Christmas, enjoy Christmas. If you're not celebrating Christmas, enjoy the day off, if you get it. But enjoy your time, over the fallow period where you hopefully get to see some family.
Yes, the goose is getting fat.
Is fallow the right word? I kind of
I
meant
think
the
so.
relaxation. that you
Sedentary.
get. Maybe, yes. Watch some movies on telly, Christmas or not, play some games, and watch a bit more, Batman related stuff while you
Yes.
have some time.
And sit down in front of the roaring fire with the dog stretched out in front with your favourite tipple, feet up, and listen to the dulcet tones of TV Podcast Industries. Because remember, keep watching, keep listening, fellow governors. Bye.
Bye.